Once upon a time, people fainted in movie theaters watching Psycho. They threw up watching The Exorcist. Now, we eat popcorn while watching someone get sawed in half. Somewhere between the monsters of Dracula and the mutilations of Saw, something changed, not just in the movies, but in us. This is the story of how we became desensitized to horror, how we went from being scared of shadows to being bored by dismemberment. In the earliest days of cinema, horror wasn't about what you saw, it was about what you imagined. Films like Nosferatu, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and Frankenstein relied on atmosphere, lighting, and mystery. Fear came from suggestion, not splatter. There was no gore, no jump scares, just eerie silence and distorted imagery. The monsters represented societal fears, disease, science gone wrong, the supernatural. Even the production code of the 1930s forced horror to stay subtle. Filmmakers had to imply violence rather than show it. When Frankenstein's monster threw a little girl into the lake, it was scandalous. Audiences weren't used to seeing death up close. Just a scream or a shadow was enough to terrify them. Back then, fear lived in the unknown. We were scared of what we couldn't see. The 1960s changed everything. The world was darker. The Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, and the collapse of the perfect American dream made horror more grounded and more personal. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho shocked audiences with a knife, a shower, and a toilet flush, things that had never been shown on screen before. People fainted. Theater owners offered refunds. Critics called it depraved. Then came The Night of the Living Dead, George Romero's low-budget masterpiece that redefined horror forever. It was gory, political, and hopeless. The hero, a black man, is shot dead by a mob at the end. That image haunted America. And then The Exorcist. It wasn't just scary, it was forbidden. Viewers vomited, screamed, and ran out of the theaters. Paramedics were stationed outside screenings. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was another milestone. Grimy, relentless, and almost documentary-like. It didn't even show that much gore, but the realism made it unbearable. The 70s were about trauma, not entertainment. Horror wasn't fun anymore, it was confrontational. It showed us the rot beneath the American dream. Then came the 1980s and horror got commercial. The slasher film took over. Halloween and Friday the 13th turned violence into a formula. Teenagers, isolation, and a mass killer. Every kill had to be more creative than the last. The 80s introduced Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, and Chucky, killers with personalities. The focus wasn't just on being scared anymore, it was on being entertained. Makeup and special effects exploded in this era. Artists like Tom Savini turned gore into art. Blood looked real, limbs tore apart convincingly, and audiences loved it. This was the turning point. Horror was no longer just fear, it was fun. People went to see how someone would die, not if they would die. Violence became a game, and that's where desensitization really began, when death became part of the spectacle. By the 1990s, audiences were too smart for their own good. They'd seen every trope, every scream, every don't go in there. So filmmakers got self-aware. Wes Craven's New Nightmare and Scream broke the fourth wall. They mocked the cliches, the virgins, the final girls, the masked killers. Horror became meta, ironic, witty, detached. We weren't scared anymore, we were in on the joke. But irony comes at a price. When you laugh at fear long enough, you stop feeling it. The emotional response that horror used to trigger began to fade. Then came the 2000s and horror turned brutal again, but this time it felt real. After 9/11, audiences didn't fear monsters, they feared humans. The enemy wasn't supernatural anymore, it was us. This gave birth to the torture porn era. Saw, Hostel, The Devil's Rejects, movies that focused on pain, punishment, and survival. These films didn't cut away, they zoomed in. Every scream, every slice, every drop of blood was the point. Critics called it exploitation, but audiences kept watching. Each sequel had to outdo the last. More traps, more gore, more shock. It was as if the horror audience had developed a tolerance, like an addiction. The first hit shocks you, the second, less so. By the fifth movie, you barely flinch. We'd become numb. Today, horror exists in two worlds. On one side, you have elevated horror. Films like Hereditary, The Witch, Get Out, Midsommar, and The Babadook. These explore grief, trauma, and mental illness, the emotional kind of horror. They don't rely on blood, but on dread and despair. On the other side, you have the extreme horror scene. The Human Centipede, The Sadness, Martyrs, Terrifier. These films push boundaries for the sake of endurance. How much can an audience take before they look away? And thanks to the internet, Nothing is shocking anymore. We've seen war footage, crime scenes, body cam videos, real horror, so fake horror has to go to the impossible extremes to compete. We're not just desensitized, we're saturated. Even jump scares have lost their sting. We've seen so many we can time them. Now fear has to be reinvented every decade because our brains keep adapting. So why aren't we scared anymore? Part of it is exposure. The average person today sees more fictional deaths in a year than someone a century ago saw in their entire life. Part of it is reality fatigue. When real news looks like a horror movie, fiction feels tame by comparison. And part of it is how horror itself has changed, from a mirror reflecting our fears to a machine manufacturing them for profit. But maybe we haven't stopped feeling fear, maybe we've just redefined it. Now it's anxiety, dread, paranoia. The horror has gone inward. From shadows on a wall to blood on the floor, horror has always evolved alongside us. When the world was innocent, we feared monsters. When the world turned cruel, we feared each other. And now, we fear nothing. Or maybe, we fear that nothing can scare us anymore. Because when everything is violent, when every image is extreme, when every nightmare is just one click away, horror doesn't shock us, it just feels familiar. And that, ironically, is the most terrifying thing of all. Do you miss the old, subtle style of horror, or are you happy with the way it's evolved? Let me know in the comments below. And thanks for watching.